My name is Henry Heinen, and we're going to install a greenhouse that's 24 by 50 approximate size. And it's done in the snow. And the reason it's in the snow is we couldn't wait any longer for the sun to come up. So in your case, probably you won't be shoveling the snow. When you lay this greenhouse out, in this case we laid out the side base first, and when the side base was put on and leveled and squared, we drilled the holes and put the plugs in. This greenhouse is it's actually a green greenhouse, which is ironic because of this white snow. Normally we have a white greenhouse on the green grass, so it's kind of funny. The holes that they're drilling is probably a 3/16 masonry bit, and they have 3/16 plugs. And if you notice how the plugs are put in, he puts it right on the screw and pushes it in and then tightens it up. When the whole base is done, all sides and ends, in this case you see them remove the end, and that is because we're going to lay the end out. It'll be on sawhorses. Normally it'll be on the ground, but this time it's on sawhorses. So the ends are taken off. After the sides are in, they're measuring it for where the posts are going to go. And if you look at your sketch, because you will have a booklet and all the sketches that's required for building this greenhouse, you will notice the size. They're measuring anyway, even though you can just use the slots in the base as a guideline. They still need to measure to make sure that that is right. And the holes that they're drilling, I believe, is a 3/8 hole with a bolt, and it's a sinker bolt that you hammer in, and you notice the washer underneath it. Hammer it in and then tighten it up. You can tighten it up with your hand with a normal wrench, or you can do it with a portable drill. Also make sure that you look at the drawings and see which way the open end of the post is facing. As we're watching it, you see the open end is facing towards either the back or the front, whichever way you want to look at. Also, you've noticed that there's extra holes in the bottom. They had to drill those because the other holes that came pre-punched were a little bit too close to the edge of the concrete. And if your concrete is a little bit wider, which could be an 8-inch or wider, then these holes would have been just fine. But this foundation was a little bit narrow, so they re-drilled it just to be on the safe side that the concrete doesn't crack. Now on this drill, you see there's a guide, like a pin, that gives you the depth of your hole, so you're not guessing. And this is the bolt. Again, they hammer it in with a hammer. They don't really care if the top of the thread is gone because that's already on, and they just tighten it up. You should always retighten the bolts by hand after you put them all in with the machine. And it also drains your battery a lot because it's a heavy torque. Now you see that we're in assembling, I was going to say installing, we're assembling a truss. And the layout of the truss is fairly simple. Again, refer to your drawings as which one is on the top chord and which one is the bottom chord. The top chord usually is a 3-inch piece of angle or channel, depending on the width. And the bottom chord with the cross bracing is usually a 2x2. The bolts that are used are 3/8 stainless steel bolts. This particular day was very cold, and it was snowing and it was a little bit windy. As you can see on this close-up, it's really kind of a wet snow. And when you work with aluminum, it's very difficult to wear gloves because of the bolts, you can't feel them. So, and if you look at the drawings again, the sketches you have, it tells you which plate you put where. You know, most of them make common sense. You center in the top and so forth, but again, look at your instructions. This video is just so you have some visual idea on how this kind of goes together. Sometimes you have trusses that are just one truss is the top cord, like we call it an open end truss. And when you have that and you don't have the bottom cord or the bracing in between that,
looked good.
And usually it's a 6-inch channel or an 8-inch channel. So you have an open span. But this type of truss is more common and it's a little bit lighter. When we videotape this installation, we of course requested professional installers, and they happened to be busy putting the post in. So in reality, this took a little bit longer than if you knew what you were doing.
This is good.
Also, when you have it all together, you make sure you measure from the outside of the truss and see what the drawing says what it has to be, and then just tighten up the plates. And after you tighten up all the plates, then you should remeasure again just in case it moved, because they can move, and if they're different widths, they can probably make a half or an inch difference, because the holes in the truss itself are not exactly tight around the bolt. So there's a way of making them wide or narrower, and they should all be exactly the same. Otherwise, your ridge will go up and your gutters will go out or in. So it's very important that they are the right size. And there's your 24-foot truss. And the trusses all tend to look the same, whether it's 24 or 30 or 20. They kind of all look the same. And in the meantime, the posts are put in, and the trusses are done. So they lift the trusses up and put all the bolts in. All the holes, of course, will line up. If there's a hole that is a little bit stubborn, you can always either drill it out or use a hammer. My favorite tool. And as you can see, they build a scaffold. One's on top, that's holding the top end. Make sure that the scaffolding is a little bit smaller than in between the spans of your trusses. In this case, it was just about the right size, and you had to dismantle it to get it out. So if you have something that's a little bit too big, put it the other way. As you can see, it goes fairly simple, and it's fairly fast, especially when you have 4 or 5 people working on it. It goes quick. And then we'll show you a few more trusses just to give you an idea what how it's really done. I think you can figure it out by now. So when they have 2 or 3 trusses in place, they start putting the purlins on, which you will see. You can, of course, put all the trusses up, but then you need to make sure they don't, in a windy place, fall down or sway. So you need to brace them. But what they're doing is they're doing probably 3 trusses. And I believe this greenhouse has 5 or 4. The whole structure is made out of aluminum, and that's why it's fairly light. If it was made out of steel, it'd be much heavier. These are the long pieces, comes in a long bundle. In some cases, comes in long crates, and they're called purlins. Purlins are usually a 3-inch channel and a ridge. I guess we're going to do the ridge first. And the middle of the greenhouse is where your joints are. So if you have 50 feet, your ridges are 20 feet on either end, so the middle is 10 feet. So they install the middle ridge, and now they're going to attach one of the end ridges to it, which they're just going to sit in midair and wait for the end wall to be finished. The ridges all come with plates on them, or angles. In this case, it's one angle in each side, and it just slides in. Make sure you don't put your hand in between the joints, because if somebody shoves it hard enough, it'll just take your finger off. Once it's in place and you're ready to put the bolts in, just pull it apart a bit and take a caulking gun and just seal the joint, and then push it together again and just bolt it on. You notice how that top plate is put on the truss. The flange is the same way as your angle flange. At one time you used to have a spacer there, but they have modified it and made it one plate. It makes it a lot easier. Also, the ridge will have some extra holes at that point, slots. So we got to make sure that you put the truss in the right slot of the ridge. A lot of this stuff is it's on the paperwork that you get, on the drawings. So if you need some measurements and know where it all goes, then you need to have a look at your drawings. Now we're doing the purlin. Again, this is a 50-footer, so the middle 10 feet gets put on. And then the other 20 foot will project 10 feet. The holes are pre-punched, so you automatically know what height the purlins are. You notice that the purlin's open end is facing up. That's actually opposite of normal practice, but that's done for a reason, and the reason is this, that a lot of people have hanging baskets and change, and they just hook it to the lip of the open side of the purlin. Now I also see one piece of gutter. When you have a few extra guys around, you can move along and not necessarily finish things off in order, but sometimes you can just do it all together. Now this gutter is put on the sidebar, and we didn't see them put the sidebar in, but maybe we'll see it later on. But that holds up the gutters. And when the gutters are joined together, they have an angle on it, and what we normally do is take that angle splicing piece off and then seal underneath and then put it back on. And with this one here, that's what they did. They took it off, sealed underneath, put it back on, and sealed the other piece and screwed it on. So then your joints are always sealed. Sealing later on does work, but it's a much better seal if we take it off for a minute and just seal underneath.
Okay. Just lay it in place,
Okay,
wherever it goes.
we are now going to start on the end wall. And this one end wall has, I believe, one single door. Both ends of the greenhouse have a door, but one end is a single door and one end is a double door. Also, this particular greenhouse is it's a triple wall, or is a 5-wall actually. 5-wall, 5/8 of an inch panels that are installed, and one side of the greenhouse is
I think it'll come out pretty
double
good.
glass sealed
Blackboard
units.
I don't like, but I can see your
They are
hand,
now
so-
putting the plates on the door frame. There's a package with a door frame. You take it apart
Do that.
and then have it packaged with the plates on it in it, and then you take the door plates out.
I'm keyed on
You can
your-
always look at the sketches that they send you, because that sometimes explains it a little bit better. So I have put the plates on the bottom of the door, and this door has I think an 8-inch door drop. So then the bottom base comes up 8 inches. Now we have the top of the door, and that's a 3-footer. And there's a plate that goes on top. That particular plate has extra holes compared to the bottom, and it's put on slightly different. Most of the time when you start with greenhouses and install greenhouses, they put a whole bunch of bolts and nuts together. In other words, you put the nuts on, and because most of the time you don't need to put the nuts on later. You can just slide them up and tighten the nut,
What we're doing
except
on
for the
the-
door
put a
frames.
plate on that corner.
So they took the nuts off, as you could see, and slide the bolts in, and then the plate goes on the door frame like that. And there's another two sets of bolts to do on top,
I don't know how many door frames.
and the
you
middle
have
one
already.
goes into the
Every one of them is different.
top of the door frame.
It works better if it's part of
It's
the
not
whole
all that
greenhouse
clear.
system, right?
Again, the drawings that you have is much clearer. And this is the angle that goes above the door. And whether there's double doors or single doors, this particular point, they're all the same. So if you look at the plate, how the plate is positioned on the door frame and the angle, you'll see all the holes just line up. And make sure that the top piece is tight against the side. Again, we had a couple of rookies doing this. You notice that because they're a little bit awkward by trying to show us what they're doing and working backwards. Now they have a brace that they brought along, which you may or may not have, because at the bottom of the door they should be tied together, and that can be tied together with the extra brace that they brought along, and or if you don't have it, you can use a piece of wood, but it just makes things a little bit easier when you move it around. Okay, once the door frame is done and the base is on, then the package that says door end or front, just open it up and take the bars out. And the bars should be self-explanatory. The longest one goes towards the middle and the shortest one goes to the end. And the angle on the top of the door goes past the door frame and picks up on the bars. It's a 7/16 driver that they're using. We like drivers because it's a little bit quicker. But again, if you're not used to doing it this way, then you may want to use a flat wrench later on and just go around and tighten the bolts a little bit more. There's a package there that's got the end rafters in it, and it also has the corner post in it. What you're seeing now is the end rafter, because the corner post is projecting past the sawhorses. So if you were laying it on the ground, then you could have put the corner post in, and then you could have tied the end rafter right to the corner post. But right now we're just putting the end rafter on the 3 bars on each side of the door, so it holds it in place. So you slide the bolts into the top of the bar, or you use the little punch out. We have and I don't know if we're going to see that. You see there's a punch out there. You just slide the bolt in and up and tighten the end rafter right to the bar. The bar in the center above the door, I think they probably put it in, but in real life they leave it out because it'll be easier to put the ridge in later on.
Move your hand.
So the end rafter in the corners, they should be marked with a little sticker that says end rafter in corner. When you lay things out on the floor like this, the slots always line up to the inside. So when you have an end rafter and you see the bolt slot, you know that it's the inside of the greenhouse. And all the bars that you put in, the slots are always on the inside. Where the bolt slot is, it's on the inside. Once you get a little more familiar with the design and the shapes, it should go fairly simple. Now we're putting the corner post on, because the end rafter is on, so we can hang it there, fasten it to the end rafter, and fasten it to the base. There is a 1/8 gap in between the top of the post and the end rafter where the gutters slide in at a later date. I think we'll see that. Now there's a 24-foot end,
But for videotaping,
and like I say, it's easier if it's on the ground.
because there's no sound on the video. We take the sound off.
What's this cave for? Like, show customers how to put them up?
Yeah.
Now when you get these commercial ends,
Okay, show the washer.
You want me to show it again?
yeah, he's showing you the bolt and the washer and the nut, and that actually is for the center bar above the door, and that's in the middle of the 2 end rafters.
Gotta be there next time you do the truss. I have to take a few
And they're putting it in. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
they're going to install it, but most likely they will take that bar out because it's easier to get the ridge in if you don't have the bar.
Yeah, you can put the other.
But I was going to say that
pieces, put 'em higher
a
up,
commercial
like the door,
greenhouse,
then you can put these on.
there was a time when you had a special truss for the end also. Now it's all kind of all built in. So when the end is together, like the way you see it with the bars and the end rafter in the corners, there's a bundle that says end bracing or end purlins, or there should be something there that indicates that it is part of the end wall. And it usually is a 2x2, and that's what it is showing you, a 2x2 for the top there, and then another 2x2 on this side,
You want to take the other ones off?
and there's probably some cross bracing.
Yeah, turn that
It should
around.
all be marked out for you.
That's it.
When you put that on, if your purlins are 3 inches deep, so 1.5 by 3 channel, which majority of the purlins are, then the space you have in between that angle and the end rafter has to be 3 inches. The bolts that you use is 1/4 by 3/4, and the washer will be your galvanized washer. The holes are already punched, and you notice there's a hole above it. Well, that's where your
It wasn't bad.
purlin will tie to.
Well, even parts are a little bit warmer, right? You can run.
So the
Yeah,
purlin will then sit right on top of that particular angle piece and fasten with a bolt through the hole that's already in
I don't know
that
if I'm
angle.
recording or not, but I think I am recording.
This is a little plate that ties the top together of the two angles.
Yeah, I'm running.
Once again, if you keep looking at this long enough, you'll get cold. John and I, we both had our own cameras. We both shot different parts of the greenhouse. And I tell you, it was cold. Of course, on the West Coast, we don't expect that too much. Again, in the same package should be your cross bracing. It could also be an angle bracing for your door, and I think we may see that yet. This is a cross bracing that's probably a 3/4 inch channel, and it matters
Put your bar straight.
exactly where it's supposed to go. It does matter because there's upright posts that have holes in them that need to line up with it. It's a little bit of a tedious job to do an end wall, but once you get it finished and you stand it up, then you're also done with it. But you notice there's a little cross brace on top that they have installed, which obviously we missed taping it. And there's a brace that's about 3 feet up. Okay, now we're done. And it's being carried in place. Now we were lucky we had lots of guys there, so it worked out really well. So this is also that angle that was taken off in the beginning of the video, which is now part of the end wall. This is where you find out whether you left a space between the end rafter and the corner, because this gutter piece now needs to slide in between. If you didn't have a space, you just loosen up the bolts and slide it up and just create the space and put it in. on the bottom. Like I said, they're not really too gentle. They're moving it over so it fits right on the other base, and on the back of it, the bolt slots should line up. And the ridge piece in the top, yeah, they left the bar in, so obviously it fitted nicely. So now the rest of the purlins will go on, and it sits on top of the angle on the end wall, and they actually all have a joining plate, so, and it's bolted together with the 3/8 bolts. The trusses all uses 3/8 stainless steel bolts, and the greenhouse uses a 1/4" stainless steel bolts. I've noticed, and you notice that bar moving, those are the side glazing bars. Once the gutter gets in and the base is on, you can put all the bars on, all the side bars on. And also, if you look closely, all the taping is done. Taping meaning to say that the foam that you get with the greenhouse is put on before we actually put it up in the field. And the reason you do that is if the bars are wet, it's hard to have the tape stick. It's a foam tape. So the side bars were all taped, and I believe the roof bars are all taped too. And like I said, every bar has a punch out. It should be about 6 inches up or 6 inches down. And you just slide the head of the bolt in and it just slides down. It helps when you're 6 feet tall and have long arms. It's 1 or 2 people in the shop that need ladders. Mike has been with the company probably as long as I can remember, 25 years. So he knows what needs to be done. Okay, so we have one end that's up, and we have a couple of trusses that are up, and the parts of the purlins are up. So now we go on with the trusses, since the other part is now basically stabilized. And now this is the last truss, because the next one will be the other end. If you were working on a nice concrete slab, you could have these rollers that just roll along, and you don't need to move the ladders. And we have used those too. We have used the scaffolding with the rollers, and it's really simple. But that didn't work today. My guess is the snow is probably 6 inches deep and compacted, and there's gravel underneath. Okay, that looks like a purlin that they're putting in. And the purlins sit right on top of the truss, so it's a pretty easy way of doing it. Okay, I think we're going to see the truss next, or not? I mean, the ridge, maybe. Nope, we just keep doing the purlins. And the sidewall bars. The sidewall bars are bolted to the plates that are on the post. And we haven't shown you a detail of that, but you'll notice that there's if their plates are not already on the post, then you have them somewhere in a bag and you need to put them on. Okay, that's a gutter. We notice how the gutters, how it fits. And it's all sealed. You didn't see that part, but it's all sealed up. And it's just screwed down. The screws that they use is a stainless steel screws. It's a probably what we used to call a number 8 1/2 inch Robinson. Robinson screws are so much nicer than Phillips. It's time to put the ridge up the top. And again, if you're the guy that is joining them together, like he is, trying to seal it up, make sure your fingers are not in between when you move it tight. The caulking they use is green. And I believe they probably use 1/4 by 3/4 inch bolts. We are still working on the sidewall. A lot of our instructions that we have done, we put the greenhouse up and then we take it down because it's much more of a perfect environment. This one definitely was not a perfect environment. It was a little hostile, I thought. But we had enough guys there to move it along, and I think we had enough video to kind of show you how it all kind of fits together. As I was saying, our greenhouses have, there you go. That's where it shows that your channel, your purlin fits in between the angle and the end rafter. And now we're doing the end wall, and that's the other one that has 2 doors in it. And the same thing applies, your door frame, and you bolt it on. As I was saying, this greenhouse is a 5-wall greenhouse, but there's lots of greenhouses that are twin wall or single glass or double glass. And but the whole kind of structure assembly is very similar. This is the, like I said, the other edge wall. It kind of shows you how it's put together. It's very similar to the one that we showed it in a little more detail. The angle that supports the purlin is being put on. No, the center bar is not put on. When you have double doors, you have just a door opening that is just that little bit bigger. The angle above the door is very similar to the 3-foot angle, except this is 6 feet. I don't think the weather's getting any better.
Not too fast, he says. Gotta do it right. You know how it
Well,
is?
as long as it's still
Not to
smiling, it's good.
scapegoat cows, whether you do it right.
And they're still busy putting the purlins on.
Let's go, what was it, 36 and 13?
And they're waiting for the end wall to be put up because that's why it just sits in midair. There's your cross brace. That's probably around 3 feet from the bottom. Again, you can see the drawing. It will tell you exactly how far up it goes.
I'm running.
On the 6-foot door, there's a channel above the door. And as you can see, it's laid flat. That stops the middle of the door from sagging. In other words, it just reinforces the door frame. And they have, each bar has 2 bolts. And these holes are all drilled. And what they're using is a 3/4 inch bolt, but you can use a 1/2 inch too. It's just they find a 3/4 inch bolt is easier because they can just put it on, as you saw, put the nut on just a little bit and then lift it up and put the other bolts in, the next ones, without them being too tight. See that 3/4 inch bolts, they stick out a little bit. See, and he's doing the next one already. So all the bolts are in. He's just putting all the nuts on and tightening it up. And this is the channel upright post, which we didn't show you on the first one.
Okay, rolling.
And so we thought we'd show you on the second one. And this is where it tells you where your cross members have to be a certain height so that these posts can then pick up the holes. And there's a washer put on. And on top of the post is actually an angle that goes on, but I don't think we'll see that. See, there's your cross member again, the channel, and you need to be lifted up a little bit because it was a little bit off, so it lines up with the post, the hole in the post. The post open end is facing towards the outside, and that's usually normal. It reinforces the end walls because the bottom will be fastened to the concrete. Seven 16th wrench. Okay, here we go. That's the end wall with a double door. Fits in between the concrete space there. See, notice the bottom of the door has a spacer, a brace that holds it apart to the right width. You just drop it into place. And then bolt the corners to the ridge, to the gutters. And the ridge is supposed to slide in. This base has been put on before. The holes were already pre-drilled. So that makes it really easy. When you stand up the end, you just put it back to where it was and just screw it down. You know the greenhouse is then square. So here he's trying to put the ridge piece in, and it works. Do I sound surprised? Not really. He puts the bolts in. Again, there's a slot there, and tightens it up. This is a side brace that we tend to put on fairly soon after the ends are in. For the simple reason is then you can clamp it up, and if the real wind comes up, whatever, it won't move. This is he's working on the end upright post, and he drilled a hole in the concrete, and now he's fastening it down. This particular angle should also be in your long bundle, and it might be a little confusing because that is a 2x2 angle, and that's an angle that we bolt on the bottom of the truss. We used to put them on the bottom cord. Now we just put them on the kind of the inside, and what that does, that eliminates under stress when you have lots of weight on the roof, that the bottom of the purlin of the trusses will bend sideways, and thereby bending the roof downwards. So this will make sure that the truss stays upright and in place. And the way we put it there, like I say, it's out of the way. Keeps the truss straight. And it's just bolted together with a 3/8 bolt.
I caught that.
At this point, they're sliding the gutters into the end, which is between the end rafter and the post again. And they're putting an angle brace on the side. They're bolting it to the corner post, and then they probably will drill a hole in the bottom base. Okay, now we have the ends in and the sides are in. The structure's up, so now we have the bars for the roof. And you notice those little angles on top of that particular bar. All these angles go where the vent frame is, where the vents are going to be. They may be marked, they may not be marked, but they're fairly simple. On your drawings, they probably will give you a little more of a detailed shot. But those are the ones we put on first, and the slider sits to the inside of the vent opening. These were all pre-taped in the dry shop. And now they're taking the paper off.
Yep, peel them. Yeah, yeah. Make sure you put them in
Because when you put the panels on, then the paper needs to be off so that the panels can stick to the tape. On a warm day, the tape is really sticky. And a lot of times when they do their first panel, they have a little spray bottle and they spray the tape so that when they're putting the first panel in and get it set up square, it doesn't stick. You can do it with all the panels, because once the panels, especially the polycarbonate, sticks to it, it really does stick. It'll be hard to move if you don't have it in the right place. But here we take all the paper off, get it all ready, and the bars go up. Like I said, a little angle is flush on the inside of the vent opening. The ridge will be marked, any of your drawings will be marked where the vents are, and where the vents are is usually a screw in the ridge on either end of the vent, and that eliminates the vents from sliding, and we'll see that later. When the bars are in and bolted on, there's 1x2 angles that says vent frame bottoms, and they're now put on. You notice they span 2 spaces because our vents are 2 spaces wide. And all your vent frames have I'm not quite sure what they slid in there, but it's like Mohawk. So when the vents sit down, they sit on something and makes them fairly tight. Always when you go to a job, or if it's in your backyard, have 1 or 2 garbage cans ready, because it's a lot easier to right away put it in your garbage. In this case, we are used to taking some garbage cans along and right away put it in there, because once you start, especially when you unwrap bundles and so forth, you have all the wrapping all over the place. If you put it in the garbage can, right away you keep the place clean. And at least in this kind of snow, if you don't see it, you could slip on it. Okay, now as you can see, there's one sitting on top, and he's bolting the top on. At least I think he is, because we're kind of waiting. And the slider faces the opening. So in other words, it's the inside of your door frame. I mean your vent frame. And usually the guy on the bottom puts a bolt into the gutters. The purlins get done at a later date once all the bars are on. When you put that bar on, that's on top of the truss, the ridge will probably have an extra slot in it. So make sure that you're aware of which slot it goes to. Because a lot of times when we have trusses, we put a slot on either side of the truss, so we can face things either way. So one is really too many, so you kind of have to watch so you don't pick the wrong one. He just cut a bundle open that said vent frame bottoms, and he's putting one in. I think in this case there were 10. This tape might be a little bit on the slow side. We probably could have chopped a bit more out, but we wanted to, I always want to make sure that I rather overdo it than underdo it. I get people asking me to make things a little bit clearer here and there, and so I tend to be dragging things out a bit more. And this particular video was more to show you the sequence of installing it. For details, again, the drawing should show you the real details on how it kind of is bolted together. But this should tell you what sequence it goes into. There's different ways to do this, but this is our way of doing it. So the bar they just put on is for underneath the vent, and that bar will be about 20 inches shorter. They're ready to put the panel in. We missed the first one, so we're catching up. It goes fairly fast. Once you have all the bars in place and you have peeled the paper off your tape, and then you can just slide it into the top and then put it into the bottom. He's taken off the protective coating, the plastic. He's ripping it off. We usually do that very last. Sometimes, depending on the weather too, we might leave the top one on till we get it in, and then we rip it down.
I gotta do the video. On the first one, we'll do the video.
Now we saw one side of this greenhouse, I said it was thermal glazed, and then the other side is the same. It's a polycarbonate 5-wall. And the reason for that was that they wanted to see who came in the yard. So with this here, you can't really see through. Okay, he's going to show us to put the H on, and it's in your instructions. If you notice the H, see which way it's facing, and then you just slip it in underneath and push it up. And then the bottom H faces actually the other way. It's flat on the outside. Yeah, it's flat on the outside, and it slips in. Right. Don't seal the bottom of the H. I just thought I'd tell you now in case I forget. Because if there's any water that comes in between this angle and the bottom, it needs to drip out. The caps that we use are all pre-drilled or pre-punched now. And the center of the bar will hold the number 8 screw. Now he's doing it the old-fashioned way because I think the other guys are using the portable on the roof, so he's got to do it by hand. But for this, you could use a portable drill. And if we get to see the glass, then you'll notice that it's done by hand, because you should not use a portable drill. Because a portable drill on glass, you're not quite sure the tension of it. And when you do it by hand, you can actually gauge the tension. See, this goes on quite fast. What we normally do, we kind of slap it in. And especially when that foam is sticky, it holds it all in place.
That's fine.
And then another guy goes by. Also, when you take off the outside plastic, protective plastic, outside, we tend to mark a black dot on the outside in the corner. And the reason is that if you got it mixed up, you will always know what the outside is, because there's a difference between the outside and the inside. The outside has a UV red coating on it that stops it from going yellow. So my suggestion is just to mark a corner with black felt after you peel it off, and then you know which one is on the outside. Because if you get interrupted by a phone call or whatever, you can't remember which is the outside. If you're wrong, you'll know in 2 years or less.
John had enough of the snow yesterday?
Yeah. He actually enjoys this kind of stuff, eh?
Okay,
What's that?
Coming out to a job.
we'll just keep on putting the screws in.
Do that too often.
He enjoys that?
Oh yeah.
And with 3 people doing it, I'm telling you, that was fast.
Oh, he was having fun on
boys like the polycarbonate panels a lot better than glass. For one thing, it's a lot lighter. Another thing is you can use portable drills. And it goes fairly quick. It slides underneath by the ridge piece. I don't know if you can see it, but it slides under a flange. But in this case, it's underneath the vent, as you can see, because that's what I just noticed too. And underneath the vent, it has to have an H on it. All these panels are fairly tight and snug, which is good. It gives you a good solid greenhouse. The long caps are beside the vent and the short caps are under the vent. Okay, we're back to the double glass. This particular double glass sits above an intake fan. That's a motorized intake fan.
Hold it. Okay.
And depending how they did the glass, sometimes it's a little snug because if some of that rubber sticks out. Okay, and it's put in the same way as the Fivewall polycarbonate, and they're both the same thickness, like 5/8 of an inch or 16 millimeters. I'm not quite in tune with the metric just yet. These are all the H's, and the bottom ones all have drain holes in them, and they have a spacer in it. And I don't know if you're going to see that, but the drawing and the sketches that you have will show that. And the water that does come in tends to drain out. And the panels in the glass are raised up from the bottom so that it has a chance for the water to get out. This particular glass greenhouse, this glass part anyway, is just a 3 mil, 3/8 air. The cap goes underneath the gutter and it just sits on the bottom. They put the intake shutters in because when it gets really hot, they open right up. It gives you a little bit of a cross draft on the bottom of the greenhouse, and it's also tied sometimes to the exhaust fan, which is on the other end. But there are greenhouses that just have the motorized intake shutters just for extra ventilation. And they have their own separate thermostat that they can set at, let's say, 60 degrees or 70 degrees, and they open up. The roof vents are all on automatic control, and there's really no setting to it other than when it gets hot it opens, when it gets cold it closes. But the intake shutters and exhaust fan all have a thermostat that you can set the temperature at. And in this case they had I believe 4 intake shutters on one end and 2 exhaust fans on the other end. We are now gone to the other side, because that's the second side, and we actually timed it. And see how fast they actually put the panels in, and they put, I think it was a little over half an hour for 25 panels. So he went, I would say probably the right speed, but for them it was really, really fast. We now see a little segment on how to put the vents together. And the vents come in a package that tells you it's the vents. You open the package up and you lay it on the board, very similar to what you see here. The sliders in the end are already in the bar. They're on the bar. So don't slide the pieces out. If you do slide them out, you better look at the sketch and see, or the drawings, and see how they were before. So just keep the slider just the way it is, and then just put it tight to the top, which is the curl, which is the hinge. Tight to the top. The bolts that you use is 1/4 by 3/8. They're actually 1/8 of an inch shorter than what you use in the greenhouse. And so when you put the top and the bottom, tighten them up, put the center bar in. And I don't know if we're going to see it.
Finish it off.
But there's supposed to be screws put in the ends. But no, well, let's just have a look.
Okay, now.
Okay, we're going to show you putting the panels in. He's marking the outside of the panel. The way you can tell is the inside usually has a clear coating, just clear, with no printing on it, and the outside has markings on it, or the outside could be blue. Depending which company we get it from.
The other one, do the other one.
These panels do have their H's that need to be put on. Again, you see him marking it, making sure that he knows which is the outside. Like I said, he should have had a garbage can there. The outside is up. And we didn't show you on the other panels, but this is the end pieces that you put on. It's a tape, because on the other panels the tapes was already on. It was done in the shop. I didn't get a chance to show you.
Okay.
This is a tape that has holes in them. I believe this is the tape. We'll see probably a close-up on it. You can see the boys that are doing the roof are catching up.
Yeah, that's
They're
it.
getting to the end. Also, when you put this tape on the end of the panel, be careful, but the edges are very, very sharp. See, it's hard to tell from here which tape is used. The top tape on the top of the panel is solid. This has got to be the bottom tape because it seems to be a lot harder to cut.
That one you can actually peel right off. But still be careful that you don't.
And what that does, the perforated tape
Okay, stop for a sec.
has air holes in them so that the air can escape out, and also the moisture that comes into the panels can drip out. It's mainly also to keep the bugs out. But in our case, we have an H that goes on it, so it's not that many bugs that can really get in. But he's very careful pushing the edges down carefully because, like I say, you'll cut your fingers. Now the foam tape goes on. This is he's putting it on at the job site. This can also be done in your garage or in your shop that you have, and do it all beforehand and get everything done before you get into the field.
Okay, peel it off. Peel the Peel it off.
Okay, we can peel the paper off.
Okay, do the other one.
But at the end of what you're seeing here is the curl, which is the hinge on the top. And I haven't noticed them putting the screws on the ends. You see, if you look at it real close, there's a hole there, but I don't believe they put a screw in it yet. And the reason for the screw is that when you put weight on the vent, that the vent doesn't twist. The hinge doesn't twist. So it's important to put the screws in and not twist the hinge. Okay, you put the H's on. It's going to move it up and just drop it into place. There's no tape in the gutter because the H just sits in the gutter. Just sits flat.
Yeah, if you can do if you can do that end first, then what we can do is get two guys to put the doors in.
Okay, now the pieces are in.
Okay.
The caps go on. And this is the first time that he was on video, and I think he was a little nervous having the camera pointing at him.
Okay, go ahead.
Now you seal the top and the bottom.
Yeah, we'll finish in 30 seconds. He's real fast.
And the bottom you seal is where the polycarbonate goes into the H, and also where the H sits onto the gutter.
Okay.
Yes, we didn't see the screws put into the end, but remember the screws to go in the end and into the bottom, and the holes should be there. This is a leaky point beside the door, and a lot of times really doesn't matter much if there's a drop or two coming in, because the greenhouse tend to be on the wet side anyway. But just to make sure that it doesn't leak beside the door, we just fill the gap.
See what comes out.
And that panel goes beside the door. And being double glazed or 5-wall polycarbonate, there's a channel, that an H that is actually already attached to the side of the door where the panel goes in. And these panels are very simple. They should all be the right length. They should be taped on the top and the bottom. The top is a solid tape, and the bottom is a tape that has air holes in it. Perforated tape, I believe it's called. There's also 2 intake shutters on that end. And if all your panels are right, which there's no reason they shouldn't be, it would be very easy for you to figure out where they all go. Make sure that you know which side is out. Sometimes if you put it on the wrong side, flip them over, then again you will find out. Mike is doing the sealing around the door. As you can see, he's actually sealing it.
I'll pick it up.
And a lot of times the sealing is in a sense overdone, but it does stop the drafts, and it does stop some moisture from coming in the panel. But the most important sealing is if you seal the bottom of the panel, so the water does not go into the H's. And that means to say that you need to seal that on the inside and outside.
Okay, Mike, I got you.
And we didn't show that on the roof, but the roof should also be done on the inside and the outside. And you need to do the roof on the inside before you do the paneling, before you put the panel in. It makes it a lot easier. You can do it later on too, but it's just easier. And then if you let it dry overnight, then the next day you don't have to worry about putting your fingers in it. The sun came up for a little bit. You notice the shadow there? The sun came up and it actually warmed up a bit. Instead of being 40 below, it's now probably only about 20. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't that cold. The pieces above the door are all pre-cut. Yeah, the boys like the polycarbonate. It goes quick, goes fast, it's light. It's durable, doesn't break.
Ask Tyler where they went to.
The only thing that's different, you have to tape the ends. The glass, of course, is already totally sealed.
Good.
Okay, we're installing the door. Now you notice that the door's laying on sawhorses, and he's putting the the handle together. When you put the lock in, you turn it half round.
Yeah, I'm not going to
Make sure it doesn't, the center doesn't fall out. And you find the spring, put the spring in.
In the toolbox.
Find the pin, put the pin in. Find 2 screws, and put the rest to one side. Now the pin goes in, and you put that on, and you put the screw on. Now we show it to you when the door is laying flat. A lot of people hang the door first and then put the handle on. And if you're not careful, when you put the handle on, the center pin could fall inside the door. It's happened to all of us. So now we tend to learn from that, and we say the best way to do it is if you lay your door flat, and put your pin in and hold it just the way you just saw. And that way you don't have to take the door apart to get your little flat pin back. Which is usually one of the last things you do, so you want to be finished. And not start again. Okay, he's showing you the little angle that now goes on the inside of the door frame. And on that angle is where the catch go. Okay, he's putting the header on. This is the Z-bar header, which is part of your door package. And he's kind of guessing. He knows where it goes. So usually you put the notch out right in the middle, because it has slack on both sides.
Battery's going dead, Henry.
So when you put the one door in, you just screw the hinge on. Yeah. Now you'll probably lift it up, maybe put his foot underneath it. Or if it's an exact fit, it'll be perfect. There he goes. He's lifting it up, screwing it right on, and it should be in place. This is also where you find out whether your greenhouse is put up square. because when you put the panels in, if the panels are slightly off square,
Close enough.
then you know the door will also be off square. All the doors have a sweep on it. He's very confident that is the right place for the sweeper, so he puts it on beforehand. He has a little tech screw that you can actually drill holes with, and then he puts his regular stainless steel screws in. But if you're not quite sure where the bottom sweep goes, then you can do it after the door is actually in, and you can lower it to make the gap a little bit less. Double doors tend to be a little more precise, a little bit more trickier, because of course 2 doors have to be exactly square. If they're slightly off, the holes can be re-drilled on the outside, or a lot of times if we loosen up the plates on the inside of the door frame and kick it around a little bit and tighten the bolts back up, that will do the job too. There's a lot of ways of getting the door square to your greenhouse. So this end has a double door, and the other end has a single door. Okay, the outside is totally closed in now, except for your roof vents. The doors are in. I'm still working on it, but the doors will be in. The glass looks like it's all in. And it's getting dark. Okay, we have also what we call foam that is round. The round foam that you have there. It slips in between the end rafter and the panel. And if you look at the drawings, it'll tell you. And that stops the air gap. If there's an air gap there, this will stop the air gap. And here we go. I told him to push it in with something that was not his hand, because then you couldn't see anything. So he uses his screwdriver and push it in. There it goes. Also, what you probably should be doing is get some little bit of silicone and just put dabs of silicone on it so it doesn't fall down. Well, that was the end of day 2, I believe. And now we're doing the finishing, which is the next day. Another one of these gorgeous days that you really didn't ask for. And Mike here is finishing off. He's sealing the top by the ridge. He's sealing where the panel goes underneath that flange. And he's sealing alongside the vent frame. What you didn't see, that he tried to dry it enough so that it would not peel on him. So, and I don't know if any of you have used the silicone. Well, what we used to do, we used to lick our finger and tool it, as you can see. It's kind of frowned upon right now. I noticed that the guys take a water bottle with them and spray their fingers wet with water rather than licking it. So licking is not a good idea. It's probably a few chemicals you really don't want to eat. And this is done all the way along. There it is, just a close-up shot. You see that silicone. So it's a little bit of a tedious job, as you can see, especially in weather like this, when you really have to kind of dry it up to seal it. And I don't know, you also need to seal the corner of the vent frame from the inside, and I don't know if you'll see that. See, that's the outside corner. But I've noticed that the guys usually do the inside corner too. But Mike is pretty fussy. He only wants to do it once. So he takes his time, and that's what everybody needs to do. Take their time and just seal it up and tool it. And that way you only do it once. Still working on it. We have a far shot on where he is. And I think we get close to the end now. He's working on his last one. And what he's doing actually is taking the screw out. Because we're now putting in all the vents, and they all have to slide along. He has to take all the screws out of the ridge and just slide them along as he goes. And he'll do it on both sides. He'll put the vent in on both sides. Well, in this case, he probably did one side. No, he didn't. He did both sides. So there's 10 roof vents to be put in. So if you had a helper, it would be a little bit easier. But as it was, it all fitted fine. It sit right by the joints and everything lined up.
Okay. I'm rolling.
Okay, now he's putting the screws back in on that one side. So when he slides the last set of vents in, it just hits the screw, and then you know you're in the right place. There was a time when we actually were able to hook the vents in, and in between the screws. But in some places there's extremely heavy winds, it would actually pick the vent up and unhook itself. So we have changed it, and now you need to slide it in from the end. And then we also still put the screws in so it cannot move sideways. It stays in between the two screws.
Did you get the emails that I sent you with the pictures? That's good.
I took some pictures at the end of the day there before I left, and my battery was dead, so didn't get any.
I got lots.
Okay, Mike, do the last one now. Now he's going to put the other screw in. He's holding it up so he can put the screw in. Now he goes down. So you can put the screw in from the outside or from the inside. Again, we show you how the top is sealed for a minute. Just finish it off. Okay, and now the same on the other side.
This tape.
This is how you put the screw in. You actually will see it this time. And there it goes. Okay, we seal that. Now that the outside is totally finished, the vents are now in, the door is in, the fans are in, or at least the intake shutters are in. It's time to put up the automatic openers, and that's on the inside of the greenhouse. Every vent has an automatic vent opener. You get a package like that in every box.
Go the rest of the way.
And what he does, he just takes the setting pin out, doesn't use the screws, doesn't use anything else, and heaves it in the garbage.
Okay.
So don't look at all the rest. You use your own screws that you get with the greenhouse. The holes are already pre-drilled. So when you put the automatic opener on, usually the sticker is in such a way that you can actually read it. If your sticker is upside down, you might want to have another look at it, because then probably the automatic opener is put up the wrong way. But the sticker is, if you can read the sticker, then you got the right side up. The springs are always on top. There's your adjusting bolt or nut, or whatever you want to call it. We tend to just about screw it in all the way, and then it opens at the lowest temperature possible. If you wanted to open it at a later temperature, you unscrew it as far as you go, and there's about a 10-degree difference, I believe. Okay, he's working on the exhaust fans now. He's making some minor adjustments. We left this part in because there may be that you have to make some minor adjustments because of the upright post. He had to notch it out, but all said and done, it fitted nicely, and the greenhouse now is, I would consider it finished, even though we still see him working inside. And there's your finished greenhouse.